I stormed into a Catholic church on Ash Wednesday with 10 men carrying wet rags to wipe the crosses off the foreheads of every Christian we could reach, and I personally grabbed an elderly woman by the face and scrubbed the ash cross from her skin while she stared at me without flinching and whispered 5 words that I still hear every time I close my eyes. But the moment I turned to the priest to wipe the cross from his forehead, a mark appeared on my own skin that no water, no cloth, and no amount of scrubbing has ever been able to remove. And what happened in that church over the next 2 minutes left over 300 witnesses shaking so badly the priest had to cancel the rest of the service because no one could stand. Have you ever been so determined to erase someone else's faith that you never imagined God might write his answer directly on your body? My name is Kareem Hassam Al-Sharif. I'm 29 years old, and on February 22nd, 2023, Ash Wednesday, I led 10 men into the Church of Our Lady of Perpetual Help in the Shubra district of Cairo, Egypt, during the evening imposition of ashes to forcibly wipe the ash crosses from the foreheads of every Coptic Catholic in that building. I had no idea that the cross I came to erase was about to be permanently burned onto my own forehead by a power so far beyond anything I had ever encountered that my entire understanding of God would collapse in less than 120 seconds. I grew up in the Mataria district of Cairo, in a narrow apartment on the 4th floor of a crumbling concrete building where the dawn call to prayer from the Al-Mataria Mosque shook the glass in our windows and mixed with the sound of street vendors setting up their carts below. My father, Hassam Al-Sharif, sold vegetables from a pushcart in the morning and taught Quran to boys at the mosque every afternoon. He was not a wealthy man, but he carried himself like a king because in our neighborhood, knowledge of scripture outranked money. The men on our block did not make decisions about marriage or business or family disputes without consulting my father first. My mother, Fatma, wore the niqab and led a women's Quran memorization circle from our cramped living room twice a week. The smell of her tameya frying in the kitchen, while her voice guided women through difficult passages, is the earliest memory I carry. Faith in our home was not a choice anyone made. It was the floor beneath our feet, invisible until you tried to remove it. While other boys in Mataria spent their afternoons kicking footballs against alley walls or crowding into shops to watch television, I sat on the floor of the mosque beside my father, tracing Quran verses into a lined notebook until my fingers were stained with ink. By 14, I had memorized 24 chapters. I never missed a single prayer, not even the week I was hospitalized with severe dehydration during a summer heat wave, and I pulled the IV from my arm and walked barefoot to the mosque for Maghrib, because I believed that missing a prayer while still conscious was an insult to Allah that I could not live with. The elders grabbed my shoulders and told my father, "This boy has the spirit of the companions. Allah has given you a soldier." I fasted every Ramadan from age 9 without complaint, and added voluntary fasts because I believed the emptier my stomach, the closer I stood to God. But my father did not raise me only to love Islam. He raised me to despise what he called the greatest insult to monotheism on earth. He said Christians, especially the Copts who filled Shubra and Mataria with their churches and their icons and their processions, committed shirk every single day by worshiping a dead man as God. But one Christian practice enraged him more than any other. Every year, on a day they called Ash Wednesday, Coptic Catholics walk through the streets of Cairo with black crosses smeared on their foreheads. My father called it the most arrogant display of idolatry in the city. They wear the symbol of shirk on their faces, he told me when I was 12, and they walk through Muslim neighborhoods like they are proud of it. In our district, boys threw water at cops on Ash Wednesday, trying to wash the crosses off. It was treated as a game. By 18, I had joined a group of young men who organized more deliberate disruptions of Christian activity, filing noise complaints against churches, harassing Coptic shopkeepers during Lent, and heckling Christians who wore visible crosses in public. I had no idea that the cross I was trying to erase from the world was about to be written on me in a way that would make me its permanent witness. By 28, I had built the life my father designed. I earned a diploma in business from a commercial college. I married a devout woman named Marwa, who wore the niqab and was already teaching our infant son his first surahs. I worked as an inventory manager for a textile warehouse, had a small apartment, and was respected at the mosque as a young man of conviction. I had everything. Ask yourself this question. Have you ever been so certain about who you were that you never once imagined God might have a completely different identity waiting for you? In early February of 2023, a member of our group named Samir returned from a delivery run through Shubra, vibrating with rage. He had driven past the Church of Our Lady of Perpetual Help and seen a banner announcing their Ash Wednesday service. "They are advertising it now," he said. "They are inviting every Christian in the district to come and have crosses put on their heads. Hundreds of people will walk out of that church wearing the symbol of shirk on their faces for every Muslim in Shubra to see." The room erupted. A man named Reda, who served as our group's religious authority, stood and delivered the statement that turned discussion into action. "The cross on their foreheads is just ash and oil. It has no power. If someone walks in with wet cloths and wipes those crosses off during the service, every Christian in that building will see that their symbol cannot even survive a damp rag. Their God cannot protect a smudge of dirt on skin." The idea lit something inside me that felt like destiny. I volunteered to lead the operation within seconds. I felt the certainty of a man carrying divine approval. I had no idea that the Jesus whose cross I planned to erase was preparing to mark me with the one thing I feared most, in a way that would never wash off. I spent 2 weeks organizing. I recruited 10 men. Samir came first. Reda joined as our theological voice. Tamer was a pharmacy assistant with steady hands. Hani and his cousin Adele worked in the textile market and had access to bulk cleaning cloths. Fawzi was a motorcycle courier who mapped the escape routes. Yasser was a university student looking for a cause. Magdi was a plumber who feared nothing. Shaki was quiet and followed instructions without question. And Basil, my oldest friend, the one man who had been beside me since we were boys throwing water at cops in the street. We soaked dozens of large cloths in water and stuffed them into plastic bags. We visited the church once the week before, timing the service, counting doors, locating the priest station where he imposed the ashes. Our plan was simple: enter during the imposition, spread through the nave, and wipe the crosses from as many foreheads as we could before anyone could stop us. I would personally reach the priest. The night before, I rose at 2:30 in the morning and prayed tahajjud on the cold tile floor. I asked Allah to guide my hands and steel my nerves. Excitement pounded in my veins, but beneath it pressed a sensation I had never felt before, a warmth directly in the center of my forehead. Not a headache, not a fever, a warmth that felt like a fingertip pressing gently against my skin from the outside, as if someone invisible was standing in the dark, touching the exact spot where a cross would go. I rubbed my forehead, nothing there. The feeling remained. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself Shaitan was targeting the very mission I was about to carry out. I barely slept. Have you ever felt God trying to warn you through your own body and dismissed it as the enemy because admitting it was God would have meant questioning everything? We arrived at the church at 6:15 on a warm February evening. The sun was setting, and the Shubra streets were alive with traffic and voices and the smell of grilled corn from vendors' carts. The church was modest but dignified, built of sandy stone with a single bell tower and a painted icon of the Virgin above the entrance. People streamed through the doors, women in dark shawls, elderly men walking arm in arm, teenagers with prayer books, mothers carrying babies. Many of them already bore the ash cross on their foreheads from an earlier service. An elderly Coptic woman with deep wrinkles and kind eyes stood near the entrance. She saw me and smiled. "Welcome, dear. Come and receive the ashes. God bless you tonight." She touched my arm with fingers that felt like my grandmother's. She had no idea why I was there. Inside, the church was dim and heavy with incense. Candles burned in iron stands along walls painted with icons of saints whose golden halos caught the flickering light. The ceiling was low compared to the grand cathedrals, but the intimacy made the atmosphere press against my skin like warm water. A choir hummed a low Coptic chant that vibrated in my teeth. Over 300 people stood shoulder to shoulder in the nave. There were no pews. They stood in rows, foreheads marked with dark ash crosses, heads bowed, lips moving in prayer. At the front, the priest stood behind a small wooden table. He was an older man with a white beard and calm hands. Beside him sat a clay bowl filled with blessed ashes mixed with oil. One by one, congregants stepped forward, and the priest dipped his thumb into the bowl and pressed a cross onto each forehead and said words I did not understand. The silence between each marking was sacred. The beauty of that ritual disturbed something in my chest that I wanted to crush immediately. The priest marked another forehead. I gave the signal. We moved. 11 men pulling wet cloths from bags and spreading through the crowd. Tamer reached the nearest woman and pressed his cloth against her forehead and scrubbed the cross away. She gasped. Hani did the same to an old man who stumbled backward. The congregation erupted in cries. Children screamed. I pushed through the crowd toward the front. I grabbed an elderly woman by the jaw, pressed my wet cloth against her forehead, and wiped the ash cross from her skin. She did not pull away. She did not scream. She looked directly into my eyes and said 5 words in a voice so steady, it sounded like carved stone. "He already knows your name." I released her face and turned toward the priest. He had not moved. He stood behind his table with the bowl of ashes and his wet thumb, and he looked at me the way a father looks at a son who has come home muddy and bleeding and confused. He said quietly, "The cross you are trying to erase, my son, cannot be removed by human hands. It is not on their skin, it is on their souls." I raised my cloth to press it against his forehead. That is when it happened. The moment that changed everything I believed about God. Heat erupted in the center of my forehead. Not from the outside, from inside my skull. A burning point of fire directly between my eyes that radiated outward like a coal pressed against skin from within. I dropped the cloth. My hands flew to my forehead. The heat intensified. I felt something forming on my skin. Not pain, inscription. Like an invisible finger dipped in fire was drawing on my forehead from the inside out. My knees buckled. I hit the stone floor hard. My hands were pressed against my forehead, and the heat was searing through my palms. Around me, I heard the sound of 10 men crashing to the ground, every single one, simultaneously, as though the same invisible hand that was writing on me had pressed down on all of them at once. I pulled my hands away from my face and looked at my palms. They were clean, but the heat on my forehead was still burning. A woman near me screamed and pointed at my face. Others gasped. The priest walked toward me slowly and knelt on the stone and looked at my forehead, and his eyes filled with tears. I had no idea what they were all seeing. There was a cross on my forehead. Not ash, not ink, not a smudge that could be wiped away. A cross burned into my skin like a brand, glowing faintly with a warmth that I could feel pulsing with my own heartbeat. And I was not the only one. Behind me, around me, 10 men lay on the church floor with their hands on their foreheads, and every single one of them bore the same mark. 11 men who had entered that church to erase crosses now lay on the ground wearing crosses that no cloth on earth could remove. The church was completely silent. Then I heard the voice, not through my ears, through the mark itself, as though the cross on my forehead was a speaker, and Jesus was pressing his lips directly against it. He said, "You tried to wipe me from their faces, so I wrote myself on yours, not to punish you, to claim you. You are mine now. You have always been mine. And this mark is not a wound, it is a door." Tears flooded my face. I was crying harder than I had ever cried. I pressed my fingers against the burning cross on my forehead, and I felt love pouring through it, into my skull, and down through my spine, and into every corner of my body. Minutes could have been hours. Ask yourself this question. How do you explain a cross appearing on the foreheads of 11 Muslim men who came to erase crosses, unless the God behind that symbol is exactly who Christians say he is? The priest knelt beside me and placed his hand on my marked forehead. "He loves you, son. He has been waiting for you. Do you understand now?" I looked up at him through tears that would not stop. How do I follow him? What do I do? He took my hands. Right there on the stone floor of the Church of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, surrounded by 300 Coptic Catholics whose foreheads bore the same cross that now burned on mine, he led me in words that ended one life and began another. "Jesus, I came to erase your cross, but you wrote it on me instead. I have hated everything you stand for, but you marked me with love I cannot explain. I know you are real. Forgive me, save me. I am yours." The church erupted. 300 people weeping and embracing and praising. The elderly woman whose cross I had wiped away walked to me, took my face in her hands, and pressed her bare forehead against my marked one. "He already knew your name," she said again. "He always did." 9 of my 10 men gave their lives to Christ that night. We were baptized 8 weeks later at the same church. The priest used the same blessed ashes to mark each of our foreheads before the baptismal water touched us. I chose the name Girgis. The cost came within days. My father's voice on the phone was not anger. It was something colder, silence. Then, "You are no longer my son. You are dead to me." My mother wept until she could not stand. She sent one message: "You have destroyed this family." Then every number went dark. Marwa found out before I could explain. She took our son, threw her ring at the wall, and called me an apostate marked by jinn. Divorce papers arrived in 3 weeks. I was fired. My landlord evicted me. Former friends held funeral prayers. Death threats came daily. I had to leave Cairo. But I gained everything that truly matters: Jesus Christ, forgiveness that reached deeper than the worst thing I ever did, peace that the world did not give and cannot take, a church family who became truer than blood, and this mark on my forehead that has not faded, not even slightly, in over 2 years. 7 months later, I met a woman named Irini at a prayer meeting in Alexandria. She was a Coptic school teacher who wept for an hour after hearing my testimony and said, "You came to erase the cross, and God made you carry it. That is the most beautiful thing I have ever heard." We married at the Church of Our Lady of Perpetual Help in October 2023. Father Mina officiated. Samir, Reda, Tamer, Hani, Adele, Fauzi, Yasser, Magdi, and Shaki stood beside me. The priest imposed ashes on our foreheads during the ceremony. Mine landed on the mark that was already there. Today I travel across Egypt and the Middle East, showing people the cross on my forehead and telling them what happened on that church floor. Over 85 Muslims have given their lives to Christ after hearing my story. Christians who had grown ashamed of wearing their faith visibly have told me they now receive their ashes with tears because they understand the cross is not decoration, it is a claim. I had no idea that the mark I tried to erase from the world would become the mark that identifies me forever. I still worship at that church. I still kneel on the same stone. I still send letters to my parents twice a year. No response. I still pray for Marwa and my son every night. My daughter Demiana was born 4 months ago, and the first thing I did was trace a tiny cross on her forehead with oil, while her mother sang a hymn about a God who writes his name on the people he loves. Look inside your own heart right now. What cross have you been trying to erase from your life that God might be waiting to write permanently on your soul? The Muslim man who stormed that church to wipe away crosses no longer exists. In his place stands a follower of Jesus Christ who wears the cross on his own forehead and would die before letting anyone remove it. If he can transform someone like me, someone who grabbed an old woman's face and scrubbed the symbol of Christ from her skin, then he can absolutely transform you. No matter what you have done or where you come from, he is not asking you to understand. He is asking you to stop wiping him away and let him mark you as his own. Jesus is calling you right now. He is saying what he said to me through a burning cross that will never fade. You are mine. You have always been mine. Stop running. Will you let him in? Stop erasing the mark he has been trying to place on your life, and finally wear the cross that was always meant for you?